Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today, Melissa T asks, what is the process involved with climbing Mount Everest? Do you need a permit or something, or can anyone just try and climb it if they want to have a try? Just before we get started, I do want to say that this video is brought to you by KiwiCo. KiwiCo delivers monthly projects designed to make learning about science, art, and math more fun and accessible for kids aged 2 to 16 plus. Get your first month for free at kiwico.com/brainfood. Standing at a foreboding 8,848 meters, that's 29,029 feet high, Mount Everest is recognized as the Earth's highest mountain. While Everest isn't generally considered to be the most difficult peak to climb, that honor probably belongs to either Annapurna in Nepal or K2 on the China-Pakistan border. However, Mount Everest is the most famous mountain, and as such it sees the most people attempting to scale it every year. But the question today that we're answering is, can anyone just show up and start trekking up the mountain? Well, the answer is, in a word, no. The first thing you'll need to be is over 16 on the Nepali side and over 18 on the Tibetan side. The second thing you'll need if you want to climb Everest is money, and a lot of it. The exact cost of climbing the mountain varies wildly depending on a number of factors, including from which side of the mountain you want to start. It also varies depending on how many people you're attempting to climb with and what you're looking for in terms of support. A bargain basement cost a non-native could theoretically get away with would be in the range of $20,000 to $25,000. A more realistic price tag would be closer to $40,000 to $60,000 from the Nepal side and $30,000 to $40,000 from Tibet. This covers things like Sherpa guide fees, oxygen bottles, which cost about $500 a bottle with a minimum of about 5 to 6 needed by most people, as well as gear, other supplies, travel, performance-enhancing drugs, about 2/3 of climbers use these by the way, as well as many other things. If you really wanted to skimp, you could get away with not using extra oxygen, but this isn't recommended as about 40% of the people who die in the attempt at climbing Everest do so without oxygen tanks. This is despite the fact that only about 3% of all climbers make the attempt without extra oxygen. Further, such an attempt will likely result in, at minimum, a small amount of brain damage. In contrast to the penny pinchers, if you want an ultra-premium package from a given guide organization, including Sherpas to carry every little thing, meals prepared for you, plenty of bandwidth to Skype with people from the summit, yes, there is Wi-Fi all the way up the mountain these days, many oxygen bottles stored along the way, etc., you can expect to pay as much as $200,000 plus per person in order to climb the mountain in this style. It should be noted, however, that even with such a package, you'll still need to be in exceptionally good shape and have a great deal of experience in extreme mountain climbing if you want to have a realistic chance at actually making it to the top. On that note, another thing you'll need is a permit to climb Everest, which you can apply for from either the Nepalese or Tibetan authorities. This of course depends on which side of the mountain you want to make your attempt on. As for the cost of these permits, which was included in the aforementioned price estimates, up until recently, this was largely dependent on the size of the group that you were planning to climb with. For instance, on the Nepalese side, a group of 7 people could purchase a permit granting them permission to climb for about $10,000 per person. In contrast, for a person wanting to just buy a permit for themselves, this used to cost a staggering $25,000. However, the Nepalese government recently slashed the price to $11,000 in 2015 and ceased giving any sort of group discount. This change is meant to discourage people from traveling in large groups, as congestion at the summit has become a bit of a problem. The result of this occasionally being people having to abandon their attempts and try again the next day if they have the supplies that they need. By the way, do note here that the permit fee for someone to enter from Nepal is drastically cheaper at only about $750 per climber. As for the less popular Tibetan side, the permit there will currently cost you $7,000 per person. The money from these permits goes to the respective government of the country that you're climbing from and is partially spent on maintaining the various camps on the way to the summit and paying the staff who work at these camps. Said staff are also responsible for cleaning and maintaining at least parts of the mountain, a job that's exactly as dangerous as it sounds, with several Sherpas having been killed over the years cleaning trash from the mountain's higher areas. One thing that isn't guaranteed to be collected, however, is your body if you die too far up the mountain. As such, there are around 200 bodies still up on the mountain from the near 300 or so people who've died in the attempt at climbing Everest in the last century. Some of these bodies, at one time or another, actually functioned as something of additional navigation markers, though not to be fully relied on, given they occasionally disappear off the path. For example, there's Green Boots, an unknown Indian hiker's body which marked a certain point from 1996 to 2014, at which point the body disappeared, presumably having been tossed off a cliff or the like in the best possible burial given the circumstances. The body of American Frances Arsenteff was removed from the path in this way in 2007, 9 years after her death. Stay tuned for a bit more on her exceptionally sad story in the bonus facts in a bit. On this note, any group wishing to climb Everest on the Nepal side also has to pay a $4,000 deposit that is only returned if the individual returns with their trash. This fee is meant to discourage people just throwing their garbage onto the mountain as they trek. This isn't just a problem with having to send people up to collect the garbage, but also because the mountain is revered as holy by some Tibetan and Nepali people. But let's just say you're an expert climber who has all the gear, all the experience, and all the know-how to conquer Everest, but don't want to pay for permission to climb it. What exactly is stopping you from just climbing it whenever you please? Well, the answer to that is mainly because it's a really, really bad idea for several reasons. First, if caught, you will incur a massive fine and some legal troubles. A second thing to keep in mind is that the money from permits, along with paying for the upkeep of the various camps, also pays for potential rescue and evacuation teams who are on standby in the not totally unlikely event that something goes wrong. Obviously, rescue isn't generally possible in the higher regions unless someone carries you down to base camp, but the teams are there for when an attempt can be made. However, the Nepalese government notes that it is under no obligation to rescue those who are trespassing on Everest, and as such, anyone who gets into distress without getting a permit faces the very real possibility that no one will bother to come and help them. Further, given that such a trespasser would likely be attempting to climb the mountain with virtually no support, few guides are willing to take on a non-permitted climber, it is entirely likely said individual would get in life-threatening trouble regardless of how experienced they are. A third, and decidedly less depressing reason that climbing Everest without a permit is a bad idea is that if you manage to make it to the top of Everest and then climb back down without being caught, you won't be recognized as having done it. This may or may not be something that you particularly care about. Something you will care about, however, is that there are reports of Sherpas beating up people that they find trying to climb Everest without a permit. As one permitted climber who witnessed such a thing noted, "I did see the permitless chap being ushered down the hill. The Tibetan rope fixers were sent up to get him. I saw them bringing him down the ropes from the North Col to Advanced Base Camp. It was disgraceful. They literally kicked him down the ropes. It was a disgusting example of a pack of bullies egging each other on and literally beating him down the hill. It was absolutely unnecessary as he was offering no resistance and was scared out of his mind." The Sherpas are not to be trifled with. In one incident in 2013, a couple of climbers who reportedly treated a Sherpa more than a little disrespectfully were nearly killed by a mob of dozens of Sherpa guides at the base camp. They were only saved when other climbers intervened long enough for the pair to make an exceptionally dangerous rapid retreat down the mountain. One of the climbers stated, "We got kicks and punches, and Ule got a rock in the face. One of the Sherpas pulled a knife on Simone, but he managed to turn and the knife hit his hip belt. There was a period when we all thought we were going to get stoned to death." As to why he thought it happened, said climber stated, "There's an underlying feeling among the Sherpas that they've been treated quite badly by Westerners and that clients don't have any respect for them. If you look around at how incredibly luxurious some base camps are, you can see their point." So to sum up, can anyone just go and climb Everest? Well, not really, unless you happen to be an adult in great shape, have a lot of extra cash to burn, proper documentation, and feel like giving the fates a 2 to 3% chance to kill you within a couple of week period. Just before we get into the bonus facts for today's episode, I want to take a moment to tell you about KiwiCo. KiwiCo deliver monthly projects to your door that make learning about science, art, and math more fun and accessible. They have different crates for different ages, so there is sure to be something suitable for your kids. As well as containing all the supplies you need for the month's project, there are also detailed instructions that are written for kids, as well as an educational magazine. The great thing about KiwiCo for Kids is that it bridges fun and education. The great thing for parents is that it's super convenient. It all just arrives in the box and kids can get started with it right away. We had someone here at the TIFO team take one of these boxes home to their kids, and the kids absolutely loved it, although honestly, I kind of felt that they could have sent it to me because who doesn't want to build a trebuchet? But seriously though, though, this is a great way for kids to get into doing something fun that's also educational, a big win-win. And today you can support our show and also get a great offer from KiwiCo. You can get your first month of any subscription for any age for free. Just go to kiwico.com/brainfood. You'll find a link in the description below. And do bear in mind, this can also make a great gift if you don't have kids yourself. So thanks to KiwiCo for sponsoring, and let's get into those bonus facts. The first American woman to technically summit Everest without the aid of oxygen tanks was the aforementioned Frances Arsentiev. This happened in 1998. However, she is not credited with the accomplishments because she didn't make it back down. When her husband Sergei went back alone to look for her after he noticed she was missing from base camp after summiting, he encountered other climbers who stated they'd encountered his wife near a dangerous slippery rock face. They gave her oxygen, but ultimately had to abandon her when the oxygen ran low. Sergei was never seen alive again. Amazingly, despite being exposed to the elements near the summit all night and with no extra oxygen, the next day Frances was found still alive, lapsing in and out of consciousness. The climbers who found her the second time abandoned their summit attempt and tried to help her. However, they were ultimately forced to leave her behind and return to camp as attempts at carrying her, or even a matter of meters, were too exhausting in the thin air. Efforts to contact base camp for help failed. The mystery in all of this is what happened to her husband. The following year, this puzzle was solved when Sergei's body was discovered. Near where his wife's body lay on the extremely dangerous slope, he had slipped and fallen down the mountain to his death. The pair were survived by their young son. As mentioned, for the next 9 years, Frances' body lay where she died, passed by countless climbers. This all changed in 2007 when an expedition, led by one of those who were forced to abandon her, set out to bury her body. They were ultimately successful, lowering her body down off the path where it remains to this day. And now for another bonus fact. Despite the many deaths that have occurred on Everest, only around 4% of people who've attempted climbing the mountain have died in the attempt. In the last decade, that number has shrunk to under 2%, and the odds are now actually closer to 1% if you use oxygen tanks. The reduction in deaths in recent years has been largely credited to better equipment, better support as climbing the mountain has become more commercialized, and improvements in technology, such as access to the internet as one makes the ascent, which is particularly helpful in monitoring the weather. In contrast, the mountains Annapurna and K2 boast death rates of about 25% and 23%, respectively. So I really hope you enjoyed that video. As always, please do hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, let me thank KiwiCo once again for the sponsorship. Head on over to kiwico.com/brainfood, and thanks for watching.